I just did a video um, following the last one for I was going on for about 40 minutes, and it was some of my strongest insight and content to this point. And my smart device didn't have a gauge. It didn't. It, it wasn't presenting me with a gauge of power, even as I was recording. So I actually lost that recording because the device failed. And that's an example actually to a lot of what I was communicating is that these man-made contrivances, whether that be our intellectual contrivances, our religious contrivances, some of our cultural contrivances, some of our linguistic contrivances, some of our scientific contrivances, they are limited in the first place, and a great degree of that is the fact that we do things and appreciate things in a linear fashion, where there is nothing linear about what's called reality in the first place, in that things are constantly and inordinately failing or breaking down, and things are janky. This is a more so uh, uh, this is a more so fancy smart device, or at least it was when it was purchased, but it's still somewhat fancy, and it is as janky as anything else, and it has as many shortcomings as anything else. One is that you do not see the power supply as you look at yourself in a recording, and part of looking at yourself is necessary to have an idea of having an audience, because when we're communicating, we're having very sophisticated give and take of input and output, and part of that is engaging with the perception of speaking to another person. And part of how I'm able to achieve some of these videos as though I were talking to someone is because I'm actually looking at myself as though engaging with myself a little bit as it had been a different person, and it gives the it's kind of like I don't want to sound like brutal or self-effacing, but it's kind of like a military person engaging with a arbitrary or dumb target. Is that you are it's a placeholder, and it allows you to develop a certain amount of meanness and tenacity that's not maybe congruent with your lived experience at that point. And it actually is a deeper message, is that there had been yourself, the target that you're practicing on, and then the further target that you will dispatch in reality had actually been yourself. And that's what breaks the heart of a lot of our service members, I think, that actually get to the point of employing violence, is that on some level you recognize that the training, and then the real live and then not now unalive target, heaven forbid, had actually been yourself. And that's what your trainers didn't teach you. That's what your trainers understood, if they really had experience, but that's what they didn't tell you, and that's what you didn't discover until you hurt someone. And then at that point you actually had hurt yourself, and you may no longer be viable, and they understood that would happen, but you were yet effective in that deadly business that they had brought you there for, and it had been business in the first place. It was conducted and transacted in terms of business as usual, and that's what someone who loves. They say love love of money, love of the beast, love of mammon is the real wickedness, and that's the wickedness that we had got caught up in, if we're calling ourselves militant. Is that it was that business, that murder business, that spilling blood. All business is murder business. There's no business without spilling blood. There's no business without profit. There's no business without getting over on someone. There's no business without costing someone. There's no cost without labor. There's no labor without output. There's no output without sacrifice. There's no sacrifice without blood, sweat, and tears. So yet this is murder business, all business, especially not the least of which war. And but what you had discovered in violence is that had been you, the training yourself, the effort, and the target had been you, and all of y'all are getting hurt in that. The only one that's going to be here before and now and hereafter had been that dummy target, which was actually an effigy of both of you who had been the same thing. And maybe that's the wicked idol. Maybe the wicked idol is the training artifact, and but maybe the righteous idol is also looking at ourselves in a camera, so that we can also have a little bit of a sounding board. But I said that sometimes you meet a military person, and they're more so mean than their lived experience had been yet. They grew up privileged and entitled, and they chose whatsoever the hell they wanted to do, and they ended up doing military work, and now they're mean, a little bit more mean than reality. The cold, the meanest things aren't necessarily mean; they're more so cold. So you meet a person that's been hurting people efficiently, and they're more so just cold in the first place. They're not necessarily mean in itself. But you take another person who is maybe privileged and entitled and also hurts people, maybe more so less efficiently, or not efficiently, but maybe more so efficiently as they get more seasoned, but they're yet a little bit more so mean than they had actually experienced yet. And then when they do experience real conflict, they're yet now this is a real meanness because they have experienced bad, but it's somewhat a little bit incongruent with reality because they had came there a little bit meaner than they had to be, and then they were maybe a little bit yet meaner or maybe softer than they had to be. So it's a little bit awkward. So that's why you meet a military person and they're just mean as hell. But I don't know if life had actually been that mean to them, as mean as they are. And some of it's from this arbitrary training of just meanness for the sake of meanness, and it's not entirely real or believable, or it's actually more real and more believable than it had to be. But it's just a little bit strange. But the same is maybe true for erudition and teaching and half mastery, like I'm doing with this, is that maybe it's a little bit more erudite and enlightened than my lived experience has been. But that's maybe a different topic. But I wanted to say that, so I was talking in that video is that a lot of things are constantly janky and constantly breaking down because we have a linear understanding of time and space and one another, and that's a problem. And I think that the dynamic, however this reality exists, the actual chemistry, the actual molecules don't tolerate something straight. Your trees cannot afford to be completely straight, have completely perfect posture because they don't yield and therefore they break down. But a lot of things around us, like this smart device, it's not breaking down as fast as a tree in a storm, but yet life is a storm. The different molecules that are about us are a storm, and as this device is rigid in electrical terms, in physical terms, and then in deeper terms, as it is linear and rigid, it is yet being affronted by reality, and it's not dynamic enough to exist, so it will yet break down. So I said in this video, in the video that failed, is that my father came from another country, and one time he was speaking about how in the United States, him and other people from his country were somewhat quizzed by the fact that everywhere you go is always hiring, now hiring, now hiring. And he used to joke about that, now hiring, now hiring. And it was I kind of didn't appreciate that because I always appreciated job opportunities. And I was like, man, we better get it while the getting's good. I'm not mocking there be hiring signs, but actually it is deep what he's saying, because a lot of people are going hungry and a lot of people are missing opportunities even as much as people are hiring. And that's because maybe people are not being hired around straight, arbitrary, linear lines. I read some of these job descriptions and they're like, we need someone on time, pays attention to detail, works hard, can move this much physical. And I'm like, damn it, I can do all that. I'm pretty sure I can really do every last thing you're asking for to a T. And for one reason or another, they're not having nothing to do with me. And that's because things aren't linear and things aren't entirely reciprocal to reality. I might have a work history, and there might have been bad actors in that work history, but yet as I mitigated and managed these bad actors as I thought I had to survive, I'm yet daunted by and relegated to that history, and I suffered upon that history. Some of that history I was doing upstanding stuff. Some of that stuff I was doing righteous stuff. Some of that stuff I was doing proper stuff, even standing up to people of higher rank who were not doing proper stuff. And I had veterans who can confirm that and witness it happen, like over radios and stuff. And yet I paid the price for that, and I will yet pay the price for that, because that history comes with me. The better things we do and the worst things we do, more so the worst things we do, but also the better things we do and more so the better things we do, we pay for that out the wazoo. And so we pay for experience, and experience doesn't necessarily suit us. Experience might get us in and out of certain situations, but that's only to buy time to yet a more daunting and a more insurmountable experience that we're going to pay for. We pay for the experience, and then we pay for the outcome that the experience delayed, and then all of that costs us, and the person with less experience is in a better standpoint in the first place, in the last place. But so it's not linear and it's not reciprocal, but they're always hiring, and that's because things are always breaking down. Things are it should be saying now breaking down, the the all dimensions of the society, even the matrix, are constantly breaking down, and that's because they're appreciated as being linear. But we ourselves also break down maybe sooner than we had to, mentally and physically, as a function of appreciating existing in linear terms. I said in the I was saying in this video that so you have at least three dimensions of true oppression. And I think what oppression is maybe a misleading term. What the function, reality, and outcome had been is gentrification. That is displacing human beings from their true and reciprocal value and relationship to one another and to an environment across arbitrary and monopolized terms, to get people outside of acting and benefiting and interfacing with the earth and one another in terms of their best interest and what is truly equitable for their position and relationship to other human beings as members of a human family. So when you call someone white, you're saying you're more human than human, and therefore you're sovereign. When you're calling someone black, you're saying you're less human than human, and therefore you're of a lesser and arbitrary, bogus title, and you're not the least of which entitled to literacy and voting and owning and enjoying property. That's what you're conveying when you're employing the term black and white as it exists within the history of the American legal system, formal and informal, recognized and de facto. That's the history, and that's what you're conveying when you're saying things like black and white. And then the term colored is also part of that. It's also a legal designation. I'm drawing most of this from Taj Tariq Bey. Is that that colored is also a legal term that means like falsifiable or bogus status. And I think that somewhat existed in Africa also. There's a deep and maybe a little bit different history of the term colored in Africa, but maybe also black and white. Where I think colored is like maybe a form of colorism, and that's it. The racism has been brutal everywhere, and colonialism also has, but it's yet been unique and somewhat different in different places, and that has to do with the history and the context of the local history and context, but also the different history and context of the people that travel to different regions. So in places like the Caribbean, you have colorism, like different degrees of status and entitlement according to shade and hue of complexion, and that works against all people. The idea of white and black works against people who are called white and black, and so do distinctions of colorism, and that's what a lot of people do not recognize. And the only people who maybe recognize that would be elite and entitled people, but they also are brutalized by some of their own entitlement in special circumstances, where yet their entitlement comes up short, because we can sell entitlement and we can get away with it and enjoy that a lot, but we can't get all the way over the finish line straight by entitlement. And then when the entitlement comes up short, we yet suffer from that at rare times, and that's the pain of the affluent. But then also the people who are deprived of understanding are also brutalized, and such as what's called black, such as what's called white, and such as what's called colorism. But the colorism has been different in different places. So it's brutal in the United States, and it's compromising the United States. But I think it may have been maybe more or less so in other, but probably more so in places like the Caribbean. There's a book about the Rastafari that I'm reading, and it starts out by breaking the history down. If you're reading something and it doesn't have overtones, or if they don't tell you about history, they're being disingenuous. I watched a video today about a young woman from the Bronx who joined the military, with what she may have or may have not understood herself to be consenting with something that's against her interests, and also human beings who are also yet her brothers and sisters, which is also not in her best interest. But she flirted with and was courted by and consented to conscription. And I've not always been beyond that myself, but I just want to say that with at least flirting with it. But she yet suffered because of that during that and after that. But she was saying that what did she say? She said dang, I lost a little bit of my train of thought. So you have the colorism has been different. The brutality of the colorism has been different in different. She said the history. She said that when she became a soldier before she went overseas, they told her nothing of the history. Because she said, according to her understanding, a dumb soldier is a better soldier. I think that's not true. I think that what's the problem is that group learning inculcates identity more effectively than independent learning, but it doesn't necessarily inculcate skill. It can inculcate skill sometimes more efficiently, certain skills, some of which forming from identity, like fortitude, discipline, cooperation, somewhat differently in a group dynamic. But sometimes one-on-one teaching is better, and I don't think that necessarily not asking questions or not thinking makes you a more efficient soldier. It might make you a more blunt soldier or able to accept assignments that are clearly against your instincts for self-preservation, functioning as a group cohort, and then maybe being appreciated as appreciating yourself as being ignorant with some of the training. Some of the author, the YouTuber King Noble has said that some of what is used in military training is a deep function of brainwashing, no less than what's called MK Ultra. I can't speak to MK Ultra, and I don't even want to think about it because some of it is it's so man-made that it can make it difficult to do things like swallow and talk because you are redirecting your basic instincts, and a lot of we are conscious and unconscious, but more so unconscious. And I don't know if we can do anything, including being conscious, without being unconscious. But as you trifle with our actual instincts and how you are regulated and how you function on an unconscious level, according to arbitrary man-made linear terms such as MK Ultra, you can confound yourself and make it difficult to do the most basic of things. What is learning? What is modern society? What is education? What is science? Is making the most basic stuff to be difficult is what it is. And so MK Ultra is an example of that, but some of it can be effective in effing other people over at times. So the MK Ultra is used in training. I'm speaking off the cuff without any sources other than King Noble, who has said that MK Ultra is a part of military training, and I can't deny that with the proximity that I've been to military training superficially and briefly. But she said that a dumb soldier is more effective, and I don't know that that's true. I would think that maybe actually a person who had one-on-one training and got a chance to ask questions to their trainer and was yet trained with a level of discipline and respect might be more efficient. So you have so a lot of soldiers are mercenaries in the first place, but if you had someone like from a intimate training setting, like your advanced operators of different kinds, that sounds like a euphemism for like just simple murdering, but people with what's called higher training, that might actually be a function of asking questions and getting more intimate training, because some people learn better in groups and some people learn better one-on-one or independently, and I'm more so of the latter. But according to her, is that a dumb soldier is better, and part of that is that they were justified in not receiving a history of what they were getting themselves into and going to be participating in. And I recognize as I make this video that perhaps nothing, and I mean nothing, is honest if there hadn't been a discussion of history at one point. So I read this book about the Rastas, and it started out with history. So I think that might actually be a legit book, and I think it was actually written by a European man who had he used creative ways to ferret out the real inheritors and custodians of some of the Rastafari movement in history. I think that was like the 80s and 90s he wrote that, and some of that, the remnants of that had been from earlier generations, and they were already getting on in years by the time he did that in the 80s and 90s. But he was forthright enough to put forward a lot of the history of Jamaica as slavery existed there, and then as land tenant, like feudalism, modern feudalism existed there after slavery, and then how a lot of that was mitigated and it was brutal as a function of colorism and in degrees of complexion that more so amount to, I think, infighting and redoubling internecine infighting. And I've said that infighting will occur whether with a group of all the inhabitants of Earth, or one-on-one, or me, myself, and I. Wherever you have human beings, even a single human being, you will have a conflict over resources and environment whether that's with other people or the environment itself. And then that is mitigated, and we overcome that, and we are sheltered from that, and yet we are spurred onto that, even to the point of our own undoing in death, as a function of identity. And so identity is very important. It's a grace, but it's also a death sentence. Is identity, and that will occur in any group. Even if it's me, myself, and I, there will be some form of problem with identity, and that amounts to what's called internecine infighting, and that amounts to shifting of breaking of aligning upon mutual interest, and then also forming jealousy, hierarchy, and jealousy. Maybe you can't have hierarchies without jealousy, and maybe you can't have jealousy without hierarchies. So that's like a dual pair of demons that cannot be evaded in this reality. There's certain things we can't get away from in this. We cannot get away from. We cannot get away from the pain and hardship of love and sexuality, and the desire to enjoy that without maybe doing violence. I don't know if that I would want to be without that. And then you also can't get away from jealousy and hierarchy. So these are maybe demons that are as deep as what we call reality, and what we call reality shall be attended by these demons as we exist in this dimension. So if we could get onto the further ends of the universe somehow and preserve our existence as what's called human being, we yet likely have jealousy and hierarchy there. So those are your demons that are going along for the ride anywhere. But it does amount to vitality and shifting and conflict. And that yet vitalizes and shifts things, and it keeps change, because this reality is imminent change, and the deeper what guarantees that is the infighting with others, one-on-one, and with ourselves in terms and over issues of identity. I just read a book. So what I want to say is that well, so you've had colorism in different points, but also I read a book about the Rastas, and it was honest enough to broach history, and I think that that the statement of that soldier, this woman from the Bronx, it confirms that when you're getting up on bad business or disingenuous stuff, if there had been no discussion of history, it's likely not in your best interest or anything's interest, other than shedding blood. So then you did have you have had colorism, but when you hear terms like black, white, and colored, they mean different things at different regions of the earth. But more so, what they mean is that you are either sovereign, or you are and that means entitled to literacy, voting, and therefore standing around property. And there's no standing without property, or property without standing, and there's no enjoyment and furthering of existence, whether personally or collectively, without standing and property. And therefore that amounts to gentrification, and therefore gentrification is the devil. And then also, but that means different things, but more so, white means the better end of that, and black means the worst end of that. And then color also means more so the color might mitigate and exact what it means to be the worst or the best end of that. But then also colorism is as brutal, and the distinctions of hue and shade and complexion is a function of that brutality, and as brutal as any of that. Those are maybe three devils right there: white, black, and colored. That's all devilish, and it's all against human happiness and health. But so I was saying, I'm trying to just recall that video that I was having. Is that so what I was saying is that so a lot of the problem is that we think in terms of linear. We have a linear understanding of things, and what's linear, I don't think is supported by existence. And I was also saying that in this reality where we are, you have a lot of mercies and leniencies. So you have freedom of association. Ostensibly means like so-called. You have ostensibly freedom of association. You have ostensibly freedom of enjoying labor and its fruits. You have ostensibly freedom of religious association and worship, ostensibly, and you also have ostensibly freedom of thought and freedom of expression, freedom of speech, I think. And you could maybe say that literacy is a function of freedom of speech because you actually don't have coherent speech without dimensions of literacy, both reading and writing. It takes reading and writing of some kind, usually to either facilitate or to either inspire, erudite, enlighten, or make a space somehow for any other form of speech is attended by dimensions of literacy. So I was saying that black and white might actually, in the deepest sense, refer to literacy and voting, and therefore property and standing, and therefore sovereignty, and therefore agency, and therefore adult bearing, and therefore authority, and therefore paternalism, and therefore the privileges that would attend that, no less than our ability to sustain our happiness and health, but more so just existence. It's a function of entitlement, and that's a function of property and standing. There's no standing without property, or property without standing, and maybe there's no standing or property without literacy and voting. And that's what is that is what is guaranteed. That is what is afforded with the actual essence of being white, or even in modern terms, a lot of the opportunities that you do or don't get might be a function is how you resemble what's appreciated as white or not. Whether you are of any ethnic or racial background or heritage, just simple your whiteness, your sovereignty, your upstandingness, your literacy, your votedness, is your adultness is and I'm saying adult arbitrarily, is a function of whiteness, and then your blackness is the opposite of that, to your very destruction and not existing anymore because you have been pushed off of the resources and opportunities you needed to sustain your existence. That is, you have been gentrified. That is, you had been destroyed. If you get the worst of what's called black, and then maybe colorism is also as brutal, but it's a different. It's just simple the dimensions of that, because you need a hierarchy in order for brutality and jealousy. You need the jealousy makes covetousness, and that makes desire, and that's yet a form of power. And to have the desire, to have the jealousy, and then also the just the functioning vital power structure, because you always need delegation to be dynamic, and off. You need to delegate, and you need to there's a word for when you delegate and micromanage, and pass off work at different tiers, and also privilege at different tiers, and rewards to incentivize your workforce. You need a degree and scope of hierarchy, and I think that maybe the colorism is the step that is what connects the white and black, because you can't have whiteness without black, and you can't have black without white. And actually, reality is not viable without what's called black people and what's called white people, and each degree between that. Nothing is viable without the other. But yet, in order to have the privilege and the entitlement and the gentrification, you need the higher and the lower realm, and then you need to connect that over what's called colorism, and all that is brutal, and all that is death for all people, whether you're called white, black, or colored. But I was gonna say that so the linear thinking is a detriment, and then with some of the liberties that we do have ostensibly, but we do have actually some enjoyment now. It is a very small amount of wiggle room, and that is so I was gonna say so you do have some degree of agency and freedom, and that is I was gonna say about the free speech, is that so you do have freedom of worship, so you can get away with a lot of things now, more or less without the immediate painful consequences. You may yet experience the consequences. Consequences are both positive and negative and both necessary. And you can't have the potential for positive consequence without the potential for a negative consequence. You can't have risk without reward without risk, and you can't have real bearing and dignity without what's called skin in the game. And therefore so you yet do have the ability to risk and venture different statements, and sometimes you can abide within what would be called blasphemous in other periods, where I've said different heavy names in this video that I couldn't say in other times and still live to tell about it. But within that, but what we can't get away from is that a lot of things are arbitrary, linear, arbitrary, the same thing. But what we can't get away from is the cycles, because I've said in this video that I don't subscribe to a linear sense of time, and I think that what's called age is arbitrary, because the existence is existence, and it's not different. Anything that exists is not fundamentally or ultimately different from anything else that exists. So you could say that the universe is the same age as itself, but you have different degrees of agency, will, and feeling throughout the universe, and that is brought into, conceived, and broken down out of, to be recycled upon cyclical notions, upon cycles. So the to affront cycles is actually not tolerable, and it will be checked and it will be atoned for. So I said that the group, according to Tashri Bey, at least the group known as the Anunnaki, also the Iroquois Indians, were appropriated and borrowed from, which would be a heinous euphemism, but they were at least appropriated of what's called the United States Constitution, maybe without being properly cited and credited. And within that, they were aware of things called checks and balances. And some of what I was saying in the video that got deleted is that I think that one of the most moving things is what's called music. And I had a blunt and very somewhat mean but also challenging, which was beneficial, music teacher once that said that what we appreciate as music can be appreciated as melody, harmony, and rhythm, that is percussion, and none of those are entirely different. The percussive elements can be as much of a tone or pitch as any unit of a melody or harmony, and in a computer metric, a percussive element can register as a note similar to any other actual tone of a pitch of music. And then the tone of pitch of music is it's just a different timbre, that's like quality or range or frequency, but it's yet not essentially different than the pitch, but then the percussion. But the percussion is also part of the harmony and the rhythm, because you could say that rhythm, that harmony, and so harmony is multiple pitches combined to create an effect of assonance or dissonance, that's agreement or disagreement, that is enjoyable, that is harmony. But then melody is individual units of pitch that have meaning, that both the individual unit is a function of rhythm, because it is oscillating sound and silence rapidly, that amounts to a pitch and a quality or degree of that pitch. And then also the interplay between single pitches and is also rhythmic in itself, and it amounts to the sensation of music, but it's yet a feature of rhythm. The melody is rhythm, and the harmony is rhythm, and the percussion is rhythm in the strictest unit value. But then also, if you were to have harmony playing against or complementing or contrasting additional harmony, or complementing or contrasting melody or multiple melodies, that's called counterpoint, but that's still a form of melody. And you could maybe say that harmony is also counterpoint, which is multiple melodies, even if they're occurring in unison or at the same time, it's still yet counterpoint, which is melody contrasting and complementing melody. But yet each unit is still a function of oscillating sound and silence kinetic and static. And I've said in other videos that that according to Arthur Avalon, you cannot have motion without rest, and you cannot have rest without motion. And that's the same actually in a very musical note, is that you're having that, but what it amounts to is actually rhythm. The pitch had been rhythm, and what you appreciate as pitch is a function of rhythm in the oscillating. So all that melody, rhythm, and percussion, harmony, melody, and rhythm is what's music, but it's yet rhythm. And so this, I'm saying, this broader reality is, reality can be appreciated in terms fundamentally of energy, which can be appreciated in terms of sound, which can be appreciated in terms of vibration, which can be appreciated in terms of sound, and which can be again appreciated in terms of consonant and vowel. What I think any sound that we can appreciate can be appreciated in terms of consonant and vowel, and the consonant and vowel can be appreciated in terms of the sound om, and the sound om can be appreciated in terms of mantra, and mantra can be appreciated in terms of existence. And so as we exist, we are individual units and members of a broader being, the individual unit being referred to as Hiva or Jiva in terms of some understanding from the region of India, and that can be appreciated on a broader sense of what's called Hivatma, which is massive existence, massive consciousness, synonymous with Chitgana, massive consciousness, synonymous with light, dark, and both. And also neither the one, light, dark, or both possible or viable without the other. Not possible without consciousness, not possible without a mantra. And so this existence is constantly, and all that I'm deriving from Arthur Avalon, this existence is constantly citing a silent mantra, in and out, breath, life and death, breath, inhale and outhale, inhale and exhale. And I think that that's a function of polarity, because had we ate our whole life, had we drink our whole life, we would confound ourselves and die. Had we drawn sustenance our whole life in terms of oxygen, doing nothing more in life, even not more sleeping or waking than breathing, if that had been purely sustenance and nutrition, we would be oversatiated. So it's more so likely polarity is what is going on with breathing. And I've said in some videos that didn't make it up, is that I think that hot and cold are deeper than we can appreciate, and what we appreciate as hot and cold are sensations of a deeper reality, and there are no fine straight lines in reality, so there are no ultimate distinctions between hot and cold, and that more so it might be wavelengths and timing, and that our molecules that we have might be deeper. So all disciplines, I think, can be reduced to chemistry and are supported by chemistry. Even the purest mathematical science cannot be flirted with and entertained without being sustained by properties of chemistry, also physics being a property of chemistry, because there's no physics without chemistry, and chemistry can maybe be appreciated as a finer degree of physics. And then with that, you have romance, attraction, repulsion, pull and push. That is the deeper that is what's going on in terms of positive and negative, which are arbitrary in my understanding. And I think what would be deeper is just simple timing and rhythm, is different cadences of rhythm, different wavelengths. And then finer than that is in life and death, in and out, polarity. And then finer than that is breathing, and finer than that is mantra, and finer than that is existence, and finer than that is a task. We are free at all points, but yet we have one command, that is to breathe. And that is true for us as each members of the universe, and maybe the universe collectively. But the universe itself is not balanced, so there may be a point where the universe does not breathe, but the universe may be inspired back to breath again by the reverberations of the energy that has been put out as breathing already. So yet we are yet always tasked with breathing, and that is maybe the greatness of what's called God, is that God is something that could breathe this long and will yet breathe. That is the simplest thing to do, and that is the most difficult thing to do. breathe, exist so far as you can breathe. So exist is so long as you can recite this mantra I give you, the Hapa silent mantra, according to Arthur Avalon, that all living beings are tasked with to one degree or the next. But what I wanted to say finally is that the deepest thing that you have to, I'm going to do one more video.